Ashley Flowers is the host of the popular Crime Junkie podcast and founder and chief creative officer of AudioChuck, the podcast network she built around her hit show. Before she was the queen of true crime, she was a curious kid in Indiana who couldn't walk away from an unsolved mystery. What began as a volunteer gig with her local Crime Stoppers became a hit radio segment and ultimately grew into AudioChuck, now one of the leading brands in podcasting. Her curiosity became her calling, not just to tell stories, but to help solve crimes and find justice for victims. A 2025 CNBC Changemaker, Ashley Flowers is in the Changemakers and Power Players spotlight. Ashley, thank you so much for doing this interview. I was so excited to get to meet you at the Turn-In Group meeting. I interviewed you on stage about a year ago, and you had already had such phenomenal growth. Until then, you've just continued to scale your company in so many incredible ways, most recently with a deal with Tubi. And I feel like you're everywhere and your podcasts are everywhere. So we're so grateful for you joining us today. And it's great having you as a CNBC Changemaker. Take us back to the beginning. You start your podcast with the story of a crime. Let's start this podcast with you telling how your story started in podcasting. Because you didn't, that wasn't your origin, right? It sounds like you always loved podcasts, but you were working at a tech company.
I was, and my degree is in biomedical research. So I have reinvented myself a number of times. When I started it, I saw a need in the market. There was content that I was looking for that wasn't being made, a certain kind of storytelling, and more importantly, a way to make and consume true crime that I felt really good about. I just wasn't seeing a ton of it. And so I thought, I'll give this a try. Maybe if I'm looking for it, some other people are too. And I underestimated how many other people were looking for the show that we would eventually go on to make.
But so how did you discover your love for this kind of content in the first place? What led you there?
I always say crime junkies are born, not made, because I don't have like a Spider-Man origin story. My grandma was a crime junkie. My mom was a crime junkie. And so I grew up on mysteries, and, it's all fiction. When I was little, I was reading Nancy Drew, and then I graduated to Agatha Christie. And eventually as I grew up, and I think for a lot of people my age, like the moment was John Benny Ramsey. Me and my co-host Britt, we always say we were tabloid height when that happened. And when we realized that these stories aren't just fiction. And I, for my entire life, have just been obsessed with wanting to solve a mystery.
That's an incredible thing. But there are a lot of people who are crime junkies. They love to consume this content, and then they don't do it themselves. What gave you the confidence when you were working at this tech company to say, no,
A delusion.
I love this. I want, no, I think this is really important, right? Change makers have to have the belief and the confidence in themselves, and also a sense of the need out there to take that leap because it's hard.
Well, it started a little bit smaller than I think a lot of people realize. So for a long time, so my desire to give back, and I think that this is where it all starts, it comes from a very authentic place of wanting to change the way true crime is consumed, the way it is made, because I really felt this feeling as even just the consumer. Before I made anything, I felt like very voyeuristic. I would consume this stuff all day, every day, in every format, and I kept thinking to myself, like, how do I find a way to give back? I would love to be a cold case detective who solves the murders, but that is not in the cards for me. So how can I find a way to give, if I'm taking from this community, how can I give back? And so I started volunteering with my local Crime Stoppers. I was like, this is in an area that's trying to help in the thing that I consume. I eventually went on their board of directors, and just from doing a ton of volunteering for them, being really active on the board, showing up to events, I kind of fell into this opportunity where I met some local radio hosts here in Indianapolis. And one of the hosts happened to be very into true crime as well. And she's like, oh, I think it would do really well on radio. At the same time, our Crime Stoppers board was telling me, hey, you're the youngest person by far we have on the board. We need to do some brand awareness just so people know we're not Smokey the Bear. And so I I kind of struck up a deal with this radio station, and I said, "Listen, if I come on every Monday morning, I'll do all the prep work. I will come on. I will tell a true crime story. You can make a segment of it. I'll do it for free. You just have to advertise for Crime Stoppers to your young demographic." And so when I started, it wasn't like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a storyteller," or I'm like, I was like, "This is my way to get Crime Stoppers in front of an audience." And the segment took off. It was the radio station's biggest segment. The radio station, like, took over and became number 1 in the city, and that's when I was like, "Oh, maybe I could be the one to tell these stories more, like, on my own terms, not in this, like, 8-minute block of time, but longer and more in depth, and maybe people do want to hear from me." And but again, it all goes back to, like, it came from a place of, like, how do I give back? And that has been at the core of even when I started, I said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna do this as to try and make it a job, but how do I give back?" So before we ever had an advertiser, I put in ads for Crime Stoppers, and I was trying to figure out how to, like, work that into the core of what we were. And as the show grew, obviously the opportunities for involvement and advocacy and change grew with it, and we kind of evolved over time. But it started just small, and that's like what I tell everyone. Like, you look at the world and the problems feel so big and so overwhelming. It's like, what's the one thing in front of you you can do? You can't you can't start like trying to get to the moon, like freaking just climb a set of stairs.
Yeah, but one foot in front of the other. But I think what's so interesting
Yeah.
is that you were purpose driven. You weren't just wanting to voyeuristically consume. You wanted to also help. And then that also, it seems like, has impacted your philanthropic arm, which you now have. But you also were really connected to your community, and that seems like that's continued. I mean, you're in Indianapolis. A lot of media companies are here in LA, where I am. I know you just opened an office in New York, but it feels like you're really committed to your hometown, and also this idea of the role that you play and that crime junkies can play in helping their communities.
Yeah, I'm really committed to it's less like a place and more people. I grew up here in the Midwest, and I wanted there to be jobs for people, like cool media jobs for people. And so it's been a push and pull. So many people over the years have wanted us to come to New York and LA, and we have a small New York office for some of like our business folks, but all of our production is done here in Indiana because I felt really strongly about keeping it here in the Midwest, about being a really safe space for like employees of all types to come and feel like they can be themselves. And that's, in a at a time when, like, the political climate especially is wild, like, being that safe space in the Midwest, I think has been really important to me as well. So, while I feel very strongly about the advocacy and the work we do in true crime, like, I feel that way about just, like, the people in my community as well.
So you wear many hats because you're a podcaster, you're a storyteller, and I want to hear a little bit more about your process. But you also built this media company, and yes, you have a CEO, but you're running a media company. How did you go from just being a content creator to creating a portfolio of podcasts and brands, and really going from the creative side to the executive side as well?
It was all happened at the same time, it's not like I started like, "Oh, I'm this creative and I'm gonna have to get into business." From the very beginning, I knew that I had to make this a business or I couldn't survive, like, I had bills to pay. And I think I'm someone who, as I came up in my career, I didn't have like a very linear path. Like I said, I reinvented myself. I did biomedical research in college, and then I did genetics research at Notre Dame. And then I went to work for a medical device company. And then I went to work for a software company. And at each of those, I've been trying to figure out what it is I wanted to do, but I also believe that if you come into an opportunity with an open mind, like it's not going to be your dream job right away, but like what can you learn and take with you to your next thing? And it's amazing how every career, every job that I've been in kind of prepared me for the next step. And so many of those jobs that I had early on were at very small or startup companies. And so I had kind of an inside look at just the nitty-gritty of what it takes to run a company, and not even necessarily like big strategic media moves, but just like how do you have to like make sure you're buttoned up with insurance and with like all the right things and contract negotiations and legal, and like when do you like rely on yourself, and when do you realize you're not the best person to do it and get help. And so I had to, like, grow both of those things, my ability to tell stories, my ability to run a company at the exact same time. I don't think I could do one and then take that off and do the other. Everything was so intertwined, and I think I'm very lucky that I just had the right opportunities and was willing to, like, learn from those and take those with me before I got into the position I found myself in.
What advice would you give to people who may also be on a nonlinear path or may have a personal passion that they would love to pursue the way you have? I mean, I think there's so much to I mean, I could see how, like, maybe your background in studying genetics has impacted the way you think about DNA evidence in your solving crimes, but I wonder if there is some advice that you feel like you could give now, having learned everything you have over the course of your career about how to get to do the work you really love.
I mean, it is try different things. I think people get so stuck on this is my career and like this is the next step, or once I'm so far down this road, I can't start over somewhere else. Like so many people have an aversion to starting over. And I would say, I mean, like that's like the first step. I mean, I feel like so many people don't even know what it is they love and want to do, or they might think they do but haven't been in it. And so what I always tell people is make sure you're trying, first of all, a lot of different things. And just because you're not making your paycheck in the thing you love does not mean you don't get to do the thing that you get to do. I think happiness comes in a ton of different packages and in a ton of different ways. And I think there is plenty of opportunity to be fulfilled and try the thing you want to do. And I originally thought I wanted to be a doctor. And so I went to work in a hospital and I realized, oh my God, I don't want to be a doctor. Thank God I didn't go to medical school. So, I mean, I think it's like putting yourself in those, and if you're putting yourself in situations too, even if you're not getting paid to do it, you're making connections. You are getting experience in something nice. So I think that's such a big part of it. I think people oftentimes will say, "It is not my 9 to 5, so I'm not doing what I love, and there's no path to it." And nobody's gonna make the path for you. You gotta, like, forge it yourself sometimes.
And sometimes it's a nonlinear path. The origin
Yeah.
of your success in podcasting is the fact that you're an incredible storyteller. You find these incredible stories and then you tell them in a way that's compelling and both relatable and fascinating and surprising. What is your process? What is your storytelling process? How do you prepare for a podcast and research it? What are your tips for being a good storyteller?
I mean, I think that the best tip I have, my process has evolved over time, and it's a lot now. But for being a good storyteller, to me, it's know your audience. And I think I'm very lucky in that the person I'm trying to talk to is me. I didn't get into true crime because it was like hot or cool or having a moment. Like I got in because I am a crime junkie. I have consumed everything and I know the questions I have. It's all I want to talk about with my friends. And I knew that those other people were out there. And so people talk about marketing personas or whatever. I didn't need to do all of that. I knew exactly who I was speaking to and what they're interested in knowing. And I think then what I had to hone in from there was really just like, okay, how do I make sure that I can also keep this like high level enough that somebody who is being forced to listen to this episode with a crime junkie will also be able to follow along and not get lost in this. And that is something that I've really liked. My editing has, I think, evolved over time.
To make it more accessible. Why I mean,
Yeah.
you're right. This is a country that's full of crime junkies, and everyone knows someone, if they're not obsessed themselves, has a friend or a sibling or a parent who's totally obsessed. Why is America so obsessed with true crime?
I think it's a number of things. Our audience, for the most part, is skews more female than male, and I think that is a relic of, like, self-preservation. I think that oftentimes in the stories we tell, women are the victims of violence, And I know from myself, I looked at these stories and I often was looking for the thing of like, where did this go wrong? What is the thing that if it had gone differently, what should I be looking out for? Are there telltale signs in a relationship that should be red flags? Like we're looking for that one thing to make sure that that doesn't happen to us. So I think there's a self-preservation aspect for a lot of women. I also think that the way the human brain works, I don't think it's Americans. I think it's like I think true crime is prevalent in so many countries. And I think our brain just is constantly trying to make sense of what doesn't make sense. It's why we're attracted not just to true crime, but to mysteries in general. We want to we want everything to fit nice and neat in a box, even if we can never get it in there.
You wanna understand it. I think it's about understanding it. So, how do you find the stories that you tell in your podcast and also that all of your other podcasters who are in your ecosystem tell as well?
I mean, we have such a deep, like, connections to, like, now law enforcement and reporters across the country. I mean, when I first started and it was me and my best friend were on a couch and not a single person to help us, I looked at stories that like, okay, in 30 years of being a crime junkie, what are the stories that have stood out to me and why? And so how do I tell those and how do I find more stories like those? Now, we're in a position where so many stories are coming to us. I mean, we have a case suggestion form that gets tens of thousands of suggestions from fans a month. And among those, family members are reaching out, law enforcement agencies are reaching out, and as our reporters are out in the field making connections and doing their reporting, I mean, you go to a department to cover one case and they'll show you 3 or 4 more cases that they've got on their docket that are their cold cases. And so we've just developed this really rich network. And I also just have this weird spidey sense. It's my superpower that I can read a single line in a newspaper and know that there is just like something wild there, and I can't quite explain it. I'm trying to figure it out so I can replicate it.
Yeah, well, sometimes you just have that superpower. So, in all of your years of telling these true crime stories, is there one story that haunts you? One story that you lie awake at night thinking about, that's like your, the one that got away, or maybe the one that you feel like you really dug into and solved.
There there are so many. I tell people, like, I can recall almost every detail of every case we've ever covered. Like, that's how deep into every single one I am, and it's almost like it's not one, it's like a steady rotation of certain and we've covered so many unsolved, like, you tend to focus there more than solved cases. But I would say, like, what's on play the most is usually whatever case I'm, like, deepest in at the moment. And there are a couple for me right now. One of a woman here in Indianapolis named Bonnie Lee Schultz, who went missing in 1997. We just reported on her story. I'm in the middle of, like, crafting that script right now. Um, and the missing person cases are what I think eat at me the most, or I spend the most time thinking about because there are so many more possibilities. It's not just like who killed this person. Is this person even dead? Was it an accident? What like when you don't know anything, everything is on the table. And so yeah, I would say like it's not a single one, but maybe a category. I spend a lot of time thinking about missing person cases.
Missing person. Tell us a little bit about your philanthropic work because there's so many content creators who don't move into activism the way you have. Um, what's the latest in your philanthropic work?
So we've worked with now, I think, something like 260 different nonprofits over about 8 years and given close to $9 million on just the audio tech side. I also started a nonprofit back in 2020 called Season of Justice, and that was born out of really the work we were doing. I we were talking to so many families and law enforcement agencies, and over again, I kept seeing that the only thing oftentimes in between a case getting solved or not getting solved was funding, especially as new technology became available and we're dealing with government budgets that were made, decades ago and like not changed. They would have suspect DNA and just sorry, couldn't do anything, which just seemed wild to me. Like I can't imagine telling a family that. And so I kept trying to say, like, as we were covering cases, like, I'll just pay for it. And no law enforcement agency wanted to take money from a media company. Fair. So I formed the nonprofit to have, like, a really, like, clean, easy way for them to just submit a grant, and I even had a former detective help me, like, formalize the grant so that it would be super simple, like, they wouldn't have to jump through hoops. They could do it, it wouldn't take up a ton of their time because they don't have any of that, and that has gone on to assist in hundreds of cases. I think they're at, like, 26 solves right now. They've named a number of Jane and John Does. And then on my family side, my husband and I also have just our own foundation, which we do a lot more, like, community work with, called Give AF.
That's awesome. So, what would your advice be as a change maker, someone who has driven change, not just in the podcasting industry, but in the world of true crime, to people who want to drive change? I mean, you have done so much. Now, I want to ask you about the Tubi deal as well. But earlier in the conversation, you said delusional. You said you were when you start out, you didn't realize sort of how big it was, and that word delusional, I think, doesn't give you credit, but it does speak to the fact that entrepreneurs sometimes choose not to acknowledge the challenges they're going to face because they have so much conviction and passion in their purpose.
I mean, I think you just, like, when I say delusional, it's like I just couldn't have imagined the end goal because I think if you this it's kind of what I was saying earlier. If you get so caught up in, like, what the end goal is, you can get lost and you can lose, like, why you got there and lose your effectiveness. Like, everything was about what was right in front of me. It's like, can I help with this one case? And can I, get this one show off the ground? And really believing, I mean, for me, it was like, if this is all I ever did, like, this would be enough. Like, this would be important enough to pour everything into. And I think so. When I say, like, the big dreams are delusional, I just mean that you gotta, if that is your goal and, like, only having the big goal is winning for you, like, so many people are gonna feel like they never won. I remember telling my husband, like, I was like, "If all I can do is, like, this work and we can pay our bills, I will be the happiest person in the world, and if I can die and say I helped solve one cold case, like, my life's work will have been worth it." And and I think that as you accomplish those and as you can, like, show people that, like, you're doing what you set out to do, you're putting yourself in the right place to also learn what needs to be done next. I think if sometimes people get these goals way out ahead of them, and the mistake they often make is they're not talking to the people who need the thing, and that's where I feel like real success is like, what is the real problem? And if you're not, like, on the ground talking to people about what the real problem is, you miss it. And you ladder up those steps.
So it goes back to understanding your audience, which is something you said earlier.
Yeah.
Um, I got to ask you about your big deal with Tubi. You went from podcaster to media mogul with this podcasting empire, and now your company Audio Chuck, named after your dog, which I appreciate, has this big deal with Tubi to do your own channel, among other things.
Yeah.
What does this deal say for the future of Crime Junkie and Audio Chuck? Where does the whole industry go from here?
I mean, the whole industry is podcast is video. I mean, you have to show up where your consumer is. And our consumers are no longer just listeners. I think they want to view as well. And I think that they're different experiences, and having to figure out a way to do both and do both well is exceptionally hard and made things much harder and much more expensive. But I think there is this shift, and it's really hard. What I found is to get people to convert from platforms. Like, if people are on YouTube, they want to be on YouTube. If people are on Tubi, they want to consume on Tubi. So I can have the same content in two places, but they're going to consume where they want to consume. And so we're doing, I think, a better job of showing up and meeting the consumers where they are, which goes back to our biggest goal of just getting these stories in front of the most eyes and ears as possible. So I'm incredibly excited. I think having our channel as we expand it out, it's going to start with Crime Junkie and the deck, but getting more and more and more of our shows on video out to the public. I think again, everything in my mind has started from like an awareness campaign. And I think that at its most basic level, we're just expanding our awareness campaign. And I'm so excited.
From one platform to another. I know you have to go. You're running a big company. You have your podcast. You have these foundations. My question is, how do you juggle all of these things? It seems like it's a very different skill set, very different mindset you need to be in storyteller mode versus working on a foundation or just running and scaling your media company. I think you have 100 employees all around the country. So how do you juggle?
You get a lot of help. So we did hire this year a CEO, and I've really put in over the last year, and this is what our investment from Churn has really helped us do. They've been a great operational partner in helping me find really skilled, experienced people who can come in and not learn on the job, but like know how to help me like take this to where we're going. And so I think that has been such a big piece of where we are now is finding the right people. And I told people this, I mean, even when it was just me running the podcast, it's like, what are you good at? And it's okay to ask for help. Like, I can't be great at every single thing. I care about a lot of things. And when I really care about something, even if it's a contract negotiation or if it is a cause in my community or it is the story I'm about to tell, I care enough to find the right people to make it the best it can be.
And so you're good at finding complementary people, but do you have any personal life hacks? How do you make your life work on a day-to-day basis? Do you have AI tools?
I know that, like, I'm so bad at I'm, like, still learning how to do prompts in Chat GPT properly, so I'm not really good at that. We actually had, but I do recognize, again, I'm good at recognizing, like, what's coming, and we just pivoted our COO to really our technology officer and figuring out how to implement AI within the company. And not to, like, necessarily create content or do any of the things that, like, I think that actually I'm best at, but how do we, like, help on the business back end? And, like, more importantly, how do we take those tens of thousands of suggestions we're getting every month and really, like, hone those and harvest those and get more cases through the door efficiently? I would say for me, I don't sleep a ton, and I don't have time to work out, so I just use every moment of my day for this thing I love, and I wish I was someone who had, like, a great schedule or a great life hack. My hack is I love what I do, and so even if I'm not at work. Like, my favorite thing to do at night is when I find out we have a new case file that came in. I know we have a reporter. I know they will read every part of that case file from top to bottom, and they will help me tell that story. But I will go home and in bed read every case file from top to bottom because I just love it. And you make room for the things you're excited about.
So maybe the advice that comes from that is just find the thing that you're gonna be obsessed with and make that your
Yeah.
career because you're gonna be really good at it if you could channel all that passion into it.
I read something once where, it was, like, scratched out, when people say, like, "Oh, love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life," and it was all scratched out, and it said, "If you love what you do, you will never work harder in your life," and, like, that is so true, but you will be so happy.
So what's the best advice you've ever received then?
From an Instagram meme? I no,
Sometimes there's great advice in Instagram memes.
I think the best advice I got it was actually the advice I hated the most, was that you can't always be right in business. And like so much of what we do in like true crime and talking about like is this like black and white, right and wrong. And I think that's like the biggest learning I've had on the business side of things is like sometimes it doesn't matter if you're right. I think in the end, in like the long run, you win and karma's a thing. But sometimes you don't get to be right in business. You just have to do the thing that like uh lets you like do the most important work.
Interesting. So be open to compromise because it's not all black and white like solving crimes. That's probably a great note to end on. I know you have to go run your business and do your podcast and solve crimes. Ashley, thank you so much for your time today. We really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
insights.
This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.